Hola, buenas noches. Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to En Casa con la Plaza. I'm Abelardo de la Peña Jr., Director of Marketing and Communications with La Plaza de Cultura y Artes. We've been doing En Casa con la Plaza now for almost a year, since last April, of course, due to the pandemic and the closures of museums and all kinds of other organizations and institutions. So these come to you 3-4 times a week from our home to yours. We bring you the best of our community's history, art, and culture via these presentations, conversations, demonstrations, and performances. Our sponsors for tonight, PepsiCo and Kaiser Permanente. If you're joining us on Zoom, please use the chat. Let us know where you're viewing from. We'd like to know who's tuning in. If you're on, also use it to make comments, ask questions. Of course, we have the Q&A feature on the Zoom. If you're on Facebook, please let us know where you're viewing from. Use the comment section, let us know where you're coming in from, and then also ask questions, make comments. The floor is yours. Our guest tonight, Naibe Reynoso, a Mexican-American multi-Emmy winning journalist based in LA, also a speaker, author, entrepreneur, talk show host. She wears many hats. She's worked and contributed to various regional, national, and international networks, including France 24, Univision, the Reels channel, the Biography channel, Fox News, KTLA, and she's even filled in as a co-host on ABC's The View. She also co-created the Trend Talk, a 1-hour talk show, and co-founded the event company Latina Fest LLC, which has produced more than a dozen successful events in the LA area, including Latina Fest at La Plaza, which we hope comes back this year, before the end of the year. In 2018, she created Con Todo Press, a publishing company that creates books to amplify the voices of underrepresented communities. Her first children's book, Be Bold, Be Brave, 11 Latinas Who Made US History, was an Amazon #1 bestseller. She's a board member for the Peabody Awards. She's also received the BIBO Award for Outstanding Work in Media, bilingual background, investigative reporting, hosting, entertainment reporting, radio, TV production, so many things that she's involved with. But tonight she's here with us on En Casa con la Plaza. So please join us, Naibe. Hello, how are you tonight?
Hello, I'm good. Thank you so much. It's been a lifetime of doing all these different things. And now I'm transitioning into owning my own company and producing books and publishing books, which is really where I feel like this is my home now. Like doing these beautiful books that represent my community is where I feel most comfortable and most natural. And I'm just so happy that I got here.
Well, that's what we're here to talk about. Of course, you've done so many other things. We know you as a TV journalist, working on Trend Talk as a co-host, Latina Fest, of course, which has been very successful both at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes and at other locations, and virtually as well. But Con Todo Press, it came with a mission. So tell us about the mission of Con Todo Press, what got you involved in creating this, and where it's taken you.
Yeah, so basically the little seed was planted in like 2015, when right before the presidential election, when I was listening to the campaign of a certain candidate that was referring to Mexicans specifically as gang members, as bad hombres, as criminals, as drug dealers, and it really broke my heart. It really, really broke my heart. I mean, I remember crying when I heard those words, because we live in a society where media is so powerful. So when you hear a powerful figure spewing so much hate towards a community, then that community that's being victimized by these words of hate is held powerless in those moments, because the microphone is on that person that's spewing the hate, right? So that was the first seed that was planted of me feeling impotent as a Latina, feeling impotent as a mom, of listening to these things through the television, through the radio, and me thinking, I need to do something about this. I can't let a tyrant talk to my community in this way, because we as adults, we can filter those messages, we can filter that information, and we could say he's crazy, he doesn't know what he's talking about, but our children can't. Those words are you know, were spewed out into the universe, and even if our children didn't hear them, our children's friends heard them, and our children's friends now, because of those words of hate, might think that our children that are Latino are the bad hombres, our criminals, our gang members. The stereotype is perpetuated. So as a mom, as a journalist, as a Latina, all of those kind of came together. And then the second thing that happened that kind of planted the seed for me to create this publishing company was that because I have a daughter and I have a son, and I felt like the attacks were being so directed towards Latino men. And because I have a son, I felt it even more personal, because our men also need to feel empowered. You know, we do talk a lot about female empowerment, and my first book was about female empowerment. But what about men? You know, we need to also like nurture the men, because the men are going to become fathers, and men are going to be, you know, become role models to other little boys. So when I walked into a bookstore and I didn't see books that represented my community in a positive light, that didn't just talk about our trauma, but talked about our triumphs as a Latino community, then that really activated me to start this company. I had already had that fire in me to do something. And then not only did I hear those words of hate, but then when I walked into a library, a bookstore, to try to counteract that, to show my child that he wasn't all those horrible things, and I couldn't really find books about Latino leaders, that angered me even more, and it really lit a fire under me. And it's kind of ironic that the power of media, as I mentioned, I'm a journalist and I understand the power of media is so powerful, that that's what I'm using now to uplift my community, because books are media, books are pieces of media. So that in essence was the genesis of Con Todo Press. The seed was planted in 2015. I incorporated my company in 2018. My first book came out in 2019. We're in 2021, and I just published my 5th book, with 3 more books on the way this year alone.
Well, the fact that you took this anger, this hurt, which I'm sure you felt as well, and turning it into something positive is remarkable. You know, a lot of people, of course, they might have gotten involved politically, they might have gotten involved in other ways, but you basically used the skills that you had. But what made you direct it towards, at least in the first books that you've done, towards children?
Well, I did it directly towards children because, for a lot of different reasons. One, because I'm a mom, and I was actually looking for books that I couldn't find. 2, like I mentioned before, these words of hate that were spewed into the universe, I wanted a filtering system that other Latinos, and not just Latinos, other children would be able to see that, no, it's not true. We're not, Latinos aren't just gang members and criminals and bad hombres. And that's why I created books that showed the other side of the coin. We're not just, you know, every community has a bad element, but Latinos have been an amazing and huge part of making the United States what it is now. We are part of the history of the United States by being Supreme Court justices, by being musicians, by being activists, by being artists, by being, you know, people involved in sports and inspirational leaders. And who's saying those messages? Who's telling our children that that's what we are too? So that's why I felt the children needed to see these books, so they could see themselves reflected, and so they could have a different narrative than what was being spewed out there.
Well, your first book, Be Bold, Be Brave, a very affirmative message right off the bat. And so you chose historical figures, Latino leaders, Latina leaders. Who was the first one that came to mind for you?
The first one that came to mind was Dolores Huerta. And, you know, we love her, right? Because when I was growing up, I remember, see, this is the thing. When I was a young woman, I'm not a young woman anymore, I'm an older woman, but when I was a young woman, I craved to learn about Latina leaders, right? I knew about Cesar Chavez, and Cesar Chavez is in this book, Fearless Trailblazers. And I kind of vaguely remember hearing about Dolores Huerta when I was growing up, right? But not that much. But that was one person that I always had in the back of my head, that like, this woman is doing amazing things. She's selfless. She's a leader in our community. And I actually interviewed her back in when my first one of my first assignments as a reporter, like in 1997, I remember I interviewed her and I went to her house. It was amazing. So she was one of the people that that first came to mind. And then just other people that I remember interviewing as a journalist, like for example, Judy Baca, she's a muralist and she's a scholar. I remember interviewing her and learning about her. So Judy Baca. Selena, of course, you know, we have to include Selena because she represents being bilingual and biculture. Rita Moreno is like amazing, and she's an Oscar winner. So there's a lot of women that came to mind, but I think Dolores Huerta was probably the first one. And then Ellen Ochoa, because I remember reading about her, but I didn't know about Ellen Ochoa until later in life. You know, what I'm like, I don't know, when I was older already. But I felt like Latinas needed to hear about her and learn about her because Ellen Ochoa isn't just the first Latina astronaut. She's a classical flutist or flautist.
Wow.
Some people pronounce it flutist, some people pronounce it flautist. And she is an inventor and she's a pilot. And she's also very humble. And she's a Mexican-American badass, you know? And I want other little girls to see that. And I was so inspired because I read this book at Teatro Luna last year. I don't know if you're familiar with that Teatro Luna, but it's like a theater here in LA, catered toward Latinas and Latinos. And one of the people that was listening to me was so inspired by Ellen Ochoa's story that she had never heard about her. She did an entire play about Ellen Ochoa because she read about my book. And now because of her play, other little girls are going to hear and learn about Ellen Ochoa. So it's like this snowball effect, right? If no one creates pieces of media to uplift our community, then no one else is going to hear it. And then no one else is going to be inspired. So we need to create that snowball effect.
Well, that's fantastic. So what was the process of course, you chose the subjects of your first book. You wrote the blurbs or the little stories about them. Now, who did you collaborate with on this? Because it's more than just writing. It also, of course, yours is an illustrated book. And who did you choose and how did you choose that person?
So I really wanted to work with people of color. I really wanted to work with other Latinas or other, you know, Latinos. So the illustrator that I chose is from Venezuela, Jone Leal, and she's very talented. And she actually she lives in Venezuela. When I met her online. I really liked her work. She's amazing. She's professional. And I was so happy that I could work with another Latina. So yeah, so Joan Leal is the one that illustrates this nonfiction series, which I called Little Biographies for Bright Minds. And then since then, I've published other books and I've collaborated with other women for those illustrations.
And but usually the route I'm imagining the route that authors take is to put together proposals, send it off to publishers, work with agents and so on. But you're a one-person operation. So how has that been that you've not only had to use your creative mind in writing the stories and so on, but now you have to take it to the business aspect of publishing. What was that like?
Wow, it was a learning curve because I always tell people, now this is, like I said, I started the business in 2018. So 2018, 19, 20. So it's like been a little under 3 years. And I always tell people that want to go into publishing or that are already started their own self-publishing journey because I have a group of Latinas, actually a Latina Facebook group with Latina writers and illustrators. And we kind of we cheer each other on, share our triumphs, share our failures. And one thing that I always say is, writing a book, even if you self-publish, it always sounds like rainbows and butterscotch in the beginning. And it is, but that's the easy part. The hard part is the business aspect and getting it out there and marketing and all of that. So it's been a big learning curve. But it's kind of like the price I have to pay in order to get my books out there, because I didn't want to go through a traditional publisher because I didn't want to ask anyone for permission. I was so tired of asking people for permission to do things, especially a structure that hasn't been very diverse in the past. So that's why I decided to do my own books. And, me aventé, como dicen en español, me aventé, like, let's just do this. And I've been slowly learning how to run a business and profit and loss and how to make a profit and all these things. But it's like, if it's something you really love, you're going to learn it and you're going to just enjoy the process.
Oh, and so Con Todo Press, it's self-contained with yourself as the CEO and the bookkeeper and the marketing person as well. Now, how do you market it? I know that you sell your books online, and of course you could go to contodopress.com. Everybody, it's right there on the chat, and I'll go ahead and put it on the Facebook as well. But do you also sell it at stores, at bookshops? And
I sell it at,
go ahead.
Yeah, I sell it at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes in the gift shop. So if anyone wants to stop by and kill two birds with one stone.
Well, right now we're online, so you could go to laplazatienda.org and it's there. I know that it's there, one of our listed books.
So, in the beginning, I just sold it on my website and on Amazon. And then slowly but surely, I started to create a list of small bookstores. And I did, very simple outreach to the little bookstores, introducing myself through an email, to sending them a little sheet with my books, a description, the price point, etc. And slowly but surely, I've been getting orders from bookstores. I've been getting orders from museums. I've been getting orders from book educational institutions and distributors. And so, yeah, it's been good. Like lately, actually, the last couple of months, I've been getting a lot of orders, big orders from like museums. I just got a big order a couple of days ago from the museum in Chicago, I forgot the exact name of it, but it's like the Mexican Museum in Chicago.
Yeah, I think it's called the Mexican Museum, and it's one of the oldest institutions devoted to of course the Mexican population, both on both sides of the border.
Right. So I just feel like little by little I've been increasing my clientele, and luckily, because the places that I have been selling my books, they have been selling, so then they keep reordering. So that's what's been happening.
Well, that's great. Were you yourself, before you started writing children's books, were you a fan of children's books? Did you use them to read to your children?
Oh yeah.
How was that? And so, what were your what were the books that you would read to your children?
Well, there's a really fun fact about children and media, et cetera, et cetera. My very first on-camera job was producing and hosting a children's television show here in Los Angeles on Channel 22. I did it for 3 years, called Planeta Chiquitran. And I didn't choose to do that show. I just happened to be working at the TV station, and the news programmer was like, "Oh, we need a children's educational TV show. Would you like to produce it and host it?" So, and that's why I kind of feel like it's come full circle. And I didn't know, like at the time, I didn't want to really do that. I wanted to be a reporter, not a children's TV host. But but I did that for 3 years, and it's so funny how now I'm like, I kind of feel like I started my career with children, and now I'm kind of ending my journalism career, so to speak, or it's the tail end with children again with these books. So the books, when I personally was growing up, the books that I remember reading, first of all, my mom would take me to the library, and I would get lost. I remember loving, loving, loving visiting the library when I was little, because it was an escape from the world. And you could just go into so many different amazing worlds, right? In the library. And I don't remember exactly when I was a kid, I don't remember exactly what authors I liked, but I remember when I was starting to become a little older, I liked, the typical like Judy Blume books. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but they were more geared towards like teenagers. But there was no Latinas in those books, and there was no Latina authors that I remembered when I was little. So I'm glad that there's more Latina authors now and more books with us in them.
Well, one of the aspects of your book, of course, is that they're bilingual in English and Spanish. So how was that decision made?
Well, these books, the reason I wanted to do them in both English and Spanish was for a few different reasons. One, I wanted Latinos that read them to be proud of our language, because another aspect of the hate that was being spewed was being ashamed of speaking your native language, right? We recall seeing videos of women being harassed at stores because they were speaking Spanish. When you go to any other part of the world and people speak multiple languages and they're not being harassed, right? So why should you be harassed because you're speaking the language that your mom taught you or that your grandma taught you? So I wanted to include Spanish so that a Mexican American or a Salvadorian American or a Honduran American or any Latin American child that lives here can see the Spanish words and feel and not feel ashamed of the Spanish, right? So that was one thing. Two, I wanted it to be a book to be able to be read by multi-generational families. So grandma maybe doesn't speak English, but the book is in Spanish, so she can read the Spanish portion to her grandchild. And three, I know, at least here in Los Angeles, there's a lot of Spanish immersion schools opening up. And I know this because when I was looking for schools for my son, there was a lot of bilingual or Spanish immersion schools, which I think is a beautiful thing. So I wanted these schools to also have resources of bilingual books. And a lot of schools have bought my bilingual books because they are Spanish immersion. Or, they are dual language. You can either call it dual language or Spanish immersion. So those were some of the reasons that I chose to make them bilingual.
So we would think that your books, at least the ones that you've published so far, are kind of geared towards a certain age range. But in fact, as you're saying, it's multi-generational, because of course the children might pick them up and read them themselves. The parents would read them to the children, and then you say, a grandma or a grandpa who could pick it up and also read it for his or her own self-knowledge and entertainment and so on.
Right. Well, I have heard a lot of my customers tell me that they like that they've learned from my books, because they did learn about figures that they hadn't known about, that they hadn't read about, that they hadn't been taught about. And I personally, I love children's books. You should see my library, and my shelves are full. I'm always buying children's books. I have so many, and I like to support other authors, and children's books are fun. I think we're all children. We're all, just because we get older in age doesn't mean that we still have that childish like feelings and tendencies, etc. So yeah, I think children's books kind of take us back to being a child, that innocence, right? Of that wonder and excitement and curiosity.
All right. Well, we have a question here on Facebook from a good friend, Chispa Hills. Her question is, what kind of literature is being written for teens in Spanish or in both languages?
Right. Well, I'm not that familiar with the teenage world, but I do know that there are a lot more books. And I've been seeing some authors, because I do follow a lot of Latina authors, and Land of Cranes is one that comes to mind. And there's another book that is, I think it already came out, called Quinceañera. That's from and we're actually gonna interview her live tomorrow. No, not tomorrow, on Friday, on Con Todo Press Instagram. She's like, there's a lot of young Latina authors and Latino authors that are writing for the teen audience, which I'm so happy about. I'm so happy about. We just saw, that book, and the name is escaping me, but it just turned into I think it's going to become a movie that America Ferrera is going to direct.
I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter.
Right. I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. I have that on audiobook. Sabrina and Corina is another great book for teens. Well, I think it's for everyone, but I think teens would appreciate it. It's like an anthology book. Here, let me show you.
Go ahead. Okay, well, if you're just joining us, we're talking with Naibe Reynoso. She's the publisher of Con Todo Press, and she's going to show us one from her collection.
Oh my God.
So what are you gonna show us there, Naibe?
Oh, do you see it?
Yes, we do.
Okay, Sabrina and Corina. This is she won, Cali Fajardo Anston. She won the National Book Award, and this is, like I said, an anthology book. So that's a good one. There's just a lot. I'm more immersed in the children's space, so I'm more familiar with children's books, but I know for sure that there's a lot more books for Latino teens than there were even 5 years ago.
All right, well, we're gonna bring them to you as we continue with our En Casa con la Plaza sessions here at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes. Now, after your first title, Be Bold, Be Brave, and it was #1 on Amazon in the children's category, or tell us about that.
Yeah, so Amazon has a lot of different categories. It was #1 in a few categories. And I can't recall because they're very specific. I think one of them was like Latino, children's Latino books on biography. There's just a lot, and I don't recall the categories, but it was #1 and in at least 3 or 4 categories at one point. And it's still selling. It's still selling really well. And I just converted it into an audiobook, literally like last week. So now it's available in audio, so you can listen to it in the car and learn the little snippets of biographies. It's available on paperback, it's available on ebook, and it's available on hardcover.
All right, and these are all little, well, not little, but big steps that you're taking as a publisher.
Definitely. It's a fun playground right now, because whether we like it or not, Amazon, I think, opened the doors to facilitate self-publishers, because I personally was able to just create in a few easy steps, the files that I already had that I used for my hardcover, to upload them and create them into a Kindle. I did the audiobook myself. I recorded it. I put in the music, I uploaded it. So I did it myself through the Amazon services. So I think, Amazon, there's a love-hate relationship, because it's big business and it's crushing a lot of small businesses. But the good thing that it has created, it has taken down the barriers for publishers. I mean, it really has. So because of that, like I said, I'm very resourceful, and I was able to Google my way through how to do an audiobook and how do you do an ebook, and it's helped me grow that. So each title has kind of a life of its own, right? Each title lives on different platforms.
All right. Well, putting back on your author's hat, how did you choose? What was it? Your second book, and how did you choose the topic?
So the second book was Fearless Trailblazers, 11 Latinos who made US history. And I knew I wanted to do one about men, Latino men. My first one, you know, I'm a woman, so it had to be about women. But but because I have a son, and because of what I told you, that our Latino boys also need to feel uplifted and empowered and not left behind, because a lot of times we do focus on the women, and that's great. But we also have to focus on our boys, on our little boys that are going to grow up to become dads and become leaders. They need to feel empowered too. They need to see role models of greatness. So when I was writing this is when the elections were happening, and I wanted to make sure that I included Julian Castro, because I wanted a little boy to see that maybe he can run for president one day, you know? So I wanted to include, we haven't had a Latina or Latino president, United States president, but we've had candidates, Latino candidates. So I wanted to show that. And, you know, Ricardo Montalban. I had to include Fernando Valenzuela because when I was little, I'm from LA, born and raised. And whoever's born and raised in LA knows that Fernando Valenzuela was huge in the 80s. And he was one of the first brown Latinos that I saw on television, you know, like Latinos that weren't in a telenovela, like he's a real person, you know. And I remember feeling that pride of being Mexican because I saw Fernando Valenzuela doing amazing on the field with the Dodgers. So I wanted to include him in here. And of course, Cesar Chavez, we have Lin-Manuel Miranda, Carlos Santana, Jean-Michel Basquiat.
Well,
I have 11 total.
Wow. Well, that's part of I guess the part about representation. You know, Latinos are becoming more represented in the media, but as you stated on Univision, Telemundo, we see Latinos and telenovelas, but they are mostly all of a certain complexion. At least the protagonists, the heroes, the ones who the plots would revolve around. But then we have somebody like Fernando Valenzuela, as you say, more of a darker skinned Mexican. Why is that important?
Well, because us as Latinos, we are everything. We're not a monolith, and most of us are dark. You know, I consider myself on the lighter side. Maybe I don't look that way to a white person. I might look brown to a white person, but within the Latino community, there's different shades, right? But most of Latino community does have darker skin because a lot of our blood is indigenous blood, right? And we also have African blood, a lot of indigenous blood. So we are darker complexion, you know, our complexion is a little darker. So I wanted little boys and little girls that are darker complected to see themselves in a book, to see that it's not just the blue-eyed, white-skinned hero, right? To see that, wow, that person looks like me. That person, if that person could do it, then I could do it. And when I went to Texas, I was so lucky to be chosen a couple of years ago as part of the Texas Reading Rock Stars, which is part of the Texas Book Festival. They chose me out of the blue to fly me out to Title I schools in Texas, and they bought tons of my books, and I was able to hand them out with, you know, for free, because that program paid for it, to so many Latino children. And I remember a couple of them were like, this person looks like me. This person looks like me. And I was like, oh my God, this is why I wrote these books.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so I'm imagining part of the joy of being an author is to reading them to your fans. How's that been going, and what experiences have you had in that respect?
Well, obviously after COVID, stopped. I have done a lot of Zoom readings, just like how I'm having a conversation with you and we have attendees. I have actually had the opportunity to read to schools through Zoom. And I've done some like pre-recorded ones that are living in different in different platforms, on different people's YouTube channels, etc. I have had libraries reach out to me and ask me if I give them permission for their librarians to read the books for their libraries, you know, because a lot of them do have their own YouTube channels. But before the pandemic, I was always booking, and I would do it myself. I would reach out to like shops and stores and festivals to be present, to be able to read my books, to meet people. So, you know, like I said, that part stopped, but hopefully it'll start up again after COVID.
Yeah, let's hope so. Now, you did your first two books, basically biographies, little mini biographies on prominent people, some that were well known, others that weren't so well known. Then you've taken a turn to do something a little bit more, a little different. A book about, of all things, tacos. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, I have it right here. How to fold a taco. And I everything that I do has a big meaning behind it. The reason that I did How to Fold a Taco, well, there's a lot of different reasons. One of them is because there's a few books about tacos that I've seen that weren't necessarily written by a Mexican American or you know, an authentic voice. And I really wanted to get, you know, I really wanted to like reclaim the taco. Like Mexicans invented the taco, like right? So that was kind of the ego of like, no, I'm a Mexican American. I need to write about tacos. Like, why are these people writing about tacos? I know this. I was like raised on tacos. So that was one of the reasons. A second reason that I wrote this book is because I wanted to include a brief history of the taco, which I have here, a brief history of the taco. And this is literally a history lesson for children so they can still feel proud of their Mexican heritage. And right here, I say a lot of things about the history of the taco, but one of the things that I say is that the first tacos were made with corn tortillas. Corn would not exist if it weren't for the indigenous people of the Americas that cultivated and developed it. According to scientists, people living in what is now central Mexico developed corn, also known as maize, at least 10,000 years ago from a wild grass called teosinte, right? So I wanted that little kind of piece of history. And then I also wanted to kind of slide in the fact that Mexicans have always played a crucial role in North American culture and history. Before the US was formed, thousands of Mexicans were living in the south and western regions of North America, and many more Mexicans came to El Norte to work the mines and build railroads and help develop US infrastructure, bringing with them their delicious dish. So in here, I kind of slide in a little bit of like, you know, Mexicans really, we helped build this country. My grandfather was a bracero.
Oh, wow.
So he came to work the railroads, and we don't get credit. We never hear those stories, right? So this is, I wanted to write, I kind of, like I said, I slid in a little bit of cultural pride in this really fun book. So that was another reason. A third reason that I wrote it was because books are also, not only are they tools for education and inspiration, but they're also tools to inspire and to make your, you know, to like open up your curiosity and imagination. So I wanted to include that part in my library of books. Like, you know, sometimes there's a time and place to learn about history and to expand your knowledge, but sometimes there's a place where you just want to escape. You want to escape. You want to think about dragons and wrestlers and magicians and just use your imagination to, you know, roam free. So I wanted to write a book that really kind of inspired imagination, taking flight with your imagination. And that's why this book is really silly. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's just really, it rhymes, and it's also in English and Spanish, and it just says silly things like you should hire, you know, wrestlers can fold a taco while in mid-fight if they twist and they pull with all of their might. And then in Spanish, it rhymes too. Los luchadores doblan sus tacos con fuerza y vigor, doblando y estirando con gracia y sudor.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So you have that journalistic background where it's facts, of course, research, and but then this imagination that you have in creating something like how to fold a taco. Where did that come from?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think because I feel like I am really creative, or I like to be creative. And the biography books, you can only be so creative, right? You can't invent the history of these leaders. You can't invent a leader that doesn't exist. You have to kind of stick to the facts. So I kind of wanted a book that would allow my imagination to roam free, and to imagine a dragon folding tacos and a magician making a taco disappear and putting it in his belly because it's so good. And my next sequel is how to stuff a piñata. That's the sequel to this book, which I'm writing as we speak.
All right. Well, things like that, of course, come natural to some of us. How to fold a taco, you just do this. Like, how to stuff a piñata, you just cut the hole and you get your bag of candy or whatever. But no, your imagination is really telling, and the topics that you're choosing, the way that you're working with your collaborators. Now, you came out with a book very recently, right? Just this past for Women's History Month, correct?
Yes, let me pull it out. Courageous History Makers. And in this one, Valientes Creadoras de la Historia, 11 women from Latin America who changed the world. I told you that every single book that I do is very intentional, and I have specific reasons why I write it. The reason I wrote this one first, and I wrote mainly, most of these women, if not all of them, are contemporary women that dress like you and I, right? Women that lived in this century, was so little girls can relate, so they can feel like they're learning about relatable characters. But in this book, I wanted to expand that and go like, okay, let's learn about other amazing women like Teresa Carreño, who is from Venezuela, and she performed for President Lincoln, and she performed for Woodrow Wilson in the White House. So they're not as contemporary, but they're still women that I think little girls should learn about. This Viridiana is contemporary. As a matter of fact, she's in her 30s. And I don't know if you know her story. Do you, Abelardo?
I don't know. Tell us about it.
Oh my God, her story is amazing. So she's Mexican, not Mexican American. She's from Mexico. She didn't start exercising until she was in her 20s. And at 30, 35 or 36, she climbed the 3 highest peaks in the world, Nepal, Everest, and K2, in record time. And she won the Guinness World Record for climbing these mountains in record time in her 30s. And she never exercised until she was in her 20s. So I loved her example of perseverancia, of persistence, of grit, and of thinking like anything is possible. And I love the fact that she took the Mexican flag on the peaks and she proudly, flew them, or like aired them on top of the peaks, porque las mexicanas podemos, ¿verdad?
Oh, sí, es lo que dicen, es lo que decimos. Now, so she climbed these 3 highest peaks in record time, and this isn't just record time for women; it's record time for anybody.
Yeah, for anybody, from my understanding.
Wow, that's quite an accomplishment. What a story! And so what's been the reception for this last book that you published?
Good. I mean, I've had really good a good response with all of them, and this one, I created these in a series called Little Biographies for Bright Minds. So this one has been well received, and I really liked that I could include women from Costa Rica, from Panama, from Colombia, from Peru, from Cuba, Guatemala. I really wanted other Latinas to be represented in the book. And I also wanted to include a president, a female president, Laura Chinchilla, former president of Costa Rica. So for the same reason that I included Julian Castro, but actually Laura did become president, not of this country, but she was president. So I wanted little girls to see like, hey, she was president. Maybe one day I could be president. That's why I included her. And every single woman has a different, wonderful story, very inspirational.
Oh yeah, it's going to happen before we know it.
Yes.
All right. So what do you have cooking up? You have the How to Stuff a Piñata book. Any other titles that you have cooking in there?
Yes, I'd actually love to share the screen and give you like a little taste of the next book. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. Okay, cool. So let me go here. Okay. So I think there's a bit of a delay. So as soon, okay, you see me. You can hear me, right?
Yes, I can. So tell us about the slide that you have up right now. Let's go back to a little data, because data, of course,
okay,
research is part of the publishing game.
Yes. So this is data from the Cooperative Children's Book Center, which is the only organization, to my knowledge, that has taken the time and effort to collect data about diversity in children's books. I wonder why that is. I wonder why other people aren't collecting that data, porque a lo mejor no les conviene, right? So this, according to this statistics from the Cooperative Children's Book Center, as you can see, 41.8% of the books have main characters that are white, 29.2% are animals, and only 5.3% are Latinx. Wow. So we are the purple line on the purple square. Asians have 8.7%. Black or African American have 11.9%. So we are literally at the bottom of the barrel in terms of diversity in children's literature. And that's really sad. That's really, really sad. But we're hoping that those numbers keep climbing. I see that there's so many more Latina authors and Latino authors putting their books out there, creating community of publishers and authors that support each other and cheer each other on. So hopefully these numbers will change. But imagine when you look at this data and these numbers, it's very concerning, in my opinion. Right?
It is. But I'm sure this is in 2019 and 2021. If something, after this year, I'm sure the numbers will tick up a little bit, just with the books that you're publishing.
We hope so. We hope so. So this is my next title, Courageous Camila, a story about finding your inner warrior. And I'm so excited about this book because it has a lot. It has tons and tons of cultural references. And I think not only kids will be inspired, but adults will be inspired too. So it's a story about finding your inner courage. This is one spread of the book. So you could see Camila with her mom in the back. They're watching. Camila is watching a couple of students do martial arts, right? So she wants to do martial arts. She wants to do jujitsu because she's read about these warriors in books and she wants to be a warrior. So as you can see on this side, you could see Camila reading a book and you could see the different warriors that she's reading about and that have inspired her to become a warrior. But Camila's a little shy, she's a little clumsy, she's a little hesitant, she doesn't know if she could do it, but her mom really pushes her. And this is another spread of the book. This is more towards the end of the book, because I wanted this book to show that we can find heroes and leaders in everyday people, including our parents. So Camila realizes that her mom is a warrior. Her mom learned English, her mom became a citizen, her mom started her own business, and that inspires her to call up her inner warrior. and to, you know, to face all of these challenges with grit and with courage. And there's so much more involved in this story. Another reason that I wanted to write this story is because there's a lack of representation of Latinas in sports, and Camila practices a sport. She learns jujitsu, which is a sport. And there's there's such a small representation of Latinas doing sports for a lot of different reasons, because sometimes there's barriers because of price or access. But the culture of sports is important, in my opinion, because it instills in children self-confidence, learning how to be a team player, so many different things like positive body image, learning discipline, confidence, for of course, bravery. So sprinkled in is also kind of the message of like tackling sports, like little girls should tackle sports. So this project right now, you can find, I'm going to launch it on Kickstarter. And if you go to my Instagram at Con Todo Press, and if you go to the bio, you can click that and it'll take you to my Kickstarter page.
All right. Well, you'll have to share that with us so we could share with our audience here. If not now, but we will definitely do it in on our website.
Okay.
No, thank you so much for sharing your latest title, giving away a little bit of the contents and the beautiful story behind it. And do you consider yourself a warrior?
Yeah, I think we're all warriors. And that's the beautiful part of the message of this story is Camila is a story, Courageous Camila is a story about finding your inner warrior. And one of the lines of the book is that, especially Latinos, we come from a long line of warriors, right? We are warriors. Our people have gone through so much and we're still here. We're resilient, which means that fight is in us. So not just me, all Latinas are warriors, all people are warriors, but obviously this character is Latina. So I really wanted to emphasize that Latinas are warriors and Latinos too.
All right. Well, thank you. We have from Chispa Hills again. I know that she's an educator. A lot of what I use for my classes is with Teachers Discovery. The latest thing I have had this year is through Flangu, an online library with interactive tools. It would be amazing to have your titles there and have you as a guest speaker for us educators or something. So if you go to our Facebook page, you could get in touch with Chispa Hills, send her a DM, and get involved with Flangu, an online library with interactive tools. So
Awesome.
Naibe, if you could please stop your share. And
I'm trying, but it's not, I don't know if you could do it on your end.
Here, I will try. Let me see.
Yeah, do it on your end because
okay.
I put like, okay, because I put pause share and then nothing happened. So
no, I don't know what's going on. Oh, I'm
okay.
back. All right. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing some time with us, Naibe. This has been a great conversation. I really have enjoyed knowing more about your books, about the inspiration behind it, about, of course, your journey in, from being a reader, of course, to a writer as a journalist, producer, doing Trend Talk co-hosting and so on, and now a publisher of books. And so an inspiration to us and hopefully to our audience there. Thank you for joining us tonight. Let me go ahead and just share what's going to happen here at En Casa con la Plaza in the next week here. This Friday, April 9th at 7 o'clock, it's going to be an interesting one. The House of Flamboyance with Victoria Valenzuela and Mel Loera. This is the description: a queer, BIPOC and femme cast, cinematic drag, dynamic musical numbers, heartwarming messages, camp comedy, and so much more. That's the House of Flamboyance, whose virtual variety shows have charmed online viewers. So that's going to be a great one coming up this Friday at 7 o'clock. Next week, we have somebody you may know, Bel Hernandez, who will be joining Dr. Jose Luis Ruiz in his Mexican-American History Makers series, which comes out here at La Plaza, sponsored by the Mexican-American Cultural History. I forgot. I'm sorry.
The Mexican-American Cultural Education Foundation, because I'm on the board too of that.
There you go. Another board that you're on. That's fantastic. Well, he'll be joining us. They'll both be joining us along with Katia Morantes from the agency on Tuesday, April 13th. And we're still lining up the programs for next week and the rest of April. But what's really big news is that La Plaza de Cultura y Artes is reopening as the county and the state, they're loosening up the restrictions because of our success in turning the tide on COVID. We will be reopening for guests starting April 15th. There'll be information that will be shared by the end of the week on our social media, on our website, and through the media, talking about how to make reservations. Of course, there'll be a smaller capacity, a lot of health and safety guidelines. We'll be cutting down our hours somewhat. Some interesting ways to get around to the galleries, to see exhibitions that haven't been seen, that have been on our walls since last year, that you'll finally be able to see, including Carlos Almaraz and Afro Latinidad. So that the news on that is coming up by the end of the week, so that you could start joining us again. But En Casa con La Plaza will continue. If you came in late to this session with Naibe Reynoso or would like to see it again, please, we have recorded it. We'll be posting it on our YouTube page. You could also see the archived session on our Facebook, and we'll also be posting it on our website, along with the 140 plus sessions that we've been broadcasting out through Zoom and Facebook Live since April of 2020. Whew, it's been a lot, but we're gonna keep at it until I drop. Thank you so much to our sponsors, Kaiser Permanente and SoCal Gas. Thank you again to all of you that tuned in today, and thank you so much, Naibe, for joining us tonight on En Casa con La Plaza. Any last words of inspiration to our viewers?
Wow. Live life con todo. Do life con todo.
There you go. All right. Thank you so much.
And anything can happen.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Buenas noches a todos, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.